Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's jump in.
The sky above Orthus Prime was quiet, too quiet. Once a shining jewel of the Galactic Empire, its cities now flickered with power surges and ghost signals. Beneath the surface, sensors had picked up strange vibrations for 3 days straight. The Empire's engineers said it was geological stress, maybe old magma tunnels shifting. But the rhythm was wrong. It came in pulses, 3 short, 2 long, like a heartbeat, not natural, not random. In Command Hall Theta, Warden General Lethus stared at the latest seismic scan, jaw tight. "That's not rock movement," he muttered. "That's coordination." Across the room, a technician squinted at the screen, her voice cracking. "Sir, it's coming from Zone 9, the deep vault. That site was locked down 200 years ago." No one liked to talk about Zone 9, not since the war, not since the last Terran signal came from beneath it and then vanished. The vault had been sealed, declared inert, a relic forgotten, but now it was awake. Without warning, every comms terminal in the command hall blinked red. Static flooded the speakers. Then beneath the noise, a sound crawled through, a low, rising tone that didn't match any known frequency. Lights flickered, systems crashed. Alarms tried to scream but were drowned out by that single, rising note. Then the tone broke. A voice, deep, guttural, human. "Outbreak initiated." Everyone froze. No translation needed. The words were in Old Terran Standard, spoken by a species the galaxy had buried. Warden General Lethus staggered back from the terminal. "Shut it down! Block all outgoing signals!" Too late. The voice had already traveled through the relay towers, slipped past firewalls, echoed across satellites. It reached out like a forgotten curse, and across the stars, every Empire system that had ever touched Orthus Prime felt it. Outbreak initiated. And somewhere, buried deep beneath Zone 9, thick steel doors that hadn't moved in centuries groaned against age and dust. Pressure vents hissed. Rusted mechanisms clicked into life. A faint red glow ignited behind a wall of armor plating, and from it a silhouette began to rise. Not a machine, not quite human, but something in between. And it remembered who broke it. The red glow intensified, bathing the chamber walls in soft pulses like a sleeping giant's breath. The vault was massive, lined with metal older than most of the Empire's civilizations, unlabeled, unscanned, and unregistered by any current database. But now it thrummed with life. Long-dormant systems flickered awake, shuddering under the strain of forgotten purpose. Deep beneath Orthus Prime, the very foundation of the planet stirred with quiet vengeance. Inside the central pod, the silhouette became clearer. A tall frame, broad-shouldered, encased in reinforced combat plating. Hydraulic cables hissed and retracted as ancient servos spun up. A panel on its chest blinked to life, 3 lights in a triangle pattern, red, yellow, green. Vitals stabilized, cognitive lock re-engaged, command unit reawakening. The figure's eyes snapped open, cold, piercing, unmistakably human. Back on the surface, chaos bloomed. The Empire's orbital satellites had picked up the seismic energy spikes too late to respond. Orthus Prime's skies were now thick with incoming dropships, their bellies open with swarms of drones deploying across key military zones. The capital's defense systems buzzed and chattered, unsure of whether to target or stand down. Nothing in the Empire's war doctrine covered this. A single unknown human signal was now shaking the framework of their most protected world, and every high-ranking official knew why. The Terran war machines were never supposed to reawaken. Centuries ago, during the Collapse Wars, the humans had deployed autonomous war units capable of independent decision-making. Machines designed not to protect Earth, but to avenge it. These weren't just weapons, they were contingencies, revenge blueprints, each one locked beneath vaults on remote worlds, set to activate only under specific catastrophic conditions. No one knew how many had been made. No one knew where they were hidden. The Empire had assumed they'd all been neutralized after Earth fell. That assumption was about to cost them everything. "Trace the broadcast," Warden General Lethus barked. "Where did that signal originate?" The technician didn't turn. Her voice was hollow. "It came from inside the vault, sir. From the unit itself." Lethus's voice cracked. "What unit?" A pause. Then she whispered, "Designation, Aegis 09, Terran class, Outbreak prototype." The entire room went silent. They all knew what that meant. Aegis 09 wasn't just any prototype. It was one of the original Outbreak units built during the final days of the Terran resistance. It wasn't programmed to defend. It wasn't designed for diplomacy. Its only protocol, embedded into its core, was to ensure that if humanity ever vanished, no one else would thrive on their ashes. It was built to collapse empires. Lethus staggered backward, dread leaking through every cell in his body. "Seal off Zone 9, now! I want orbital strikes prepped. I want—" The ground rumbled violently. This wasn't a tremor. This was movement. The camera feed flickered, cutting to a shot of the vault from an aerial drone. The steel surface of Orthus Prime's southern hemisphere was buckling, cracking in a perfect circle nearly 4 kilometers wide. Then it split open, like a mouth opening to scream. From within, a tower emerged, jet black, jagged, and brutalist in its design. Human, purely human, not curved or graceful like Empire structures, but efficient, menacing. Built to endure, built to fight back. Hundreds of Empire troops mobilized around the structure, scrambling into formation. Heavy plasma cannons took position. Mechs stomped into place. Aircraft hovered, weapons armed and primed. Inside the command hall, Lethus leaned over the console, eyes locked on the live feed. His hand hovered over the strike command. "Now," he said. Dozens of orbital warheads launched from satellites in geosynchronous orbit. Arcing like comets, they streaked down toward the tower, their plasma tips glowing against the twilight. They never hit. Mid-descent, each warhead froze in place, just stopped, as if gravity itself had been overruled. Then slowly they rotated in the air and fell, upward. One of them smashed into a satellite, shattering it like glass. Another exploded mid-air, the shockwave blasting apart 3 Empire fighters that had been too close. The rest vanished, swallowed by some invisible force now radiating from the tower's crown. Then came the next message. Not a voice, not words, but a projection. All across Orthus Prime's communication network, military, civilian, encrypted and otherwise, the same image appeared. A map, not of one planet, not of one system, but of all Empire territories. Every major world, every stronghold, every military bastion. Marked, labeled, prioritized. This was not a warning. It was a target list. Back in the vault, Aegis 09 took its first step forward. The chamber walls shook with the weight of its movement. Behind it, more pods hissed open, secondary units, infantry class, smaller, faster, some human-shaped, others like walking tanks. All carried one thing in common, a faded emblem burned into their chest plates. TDC Terran Defense Command. Aegis 09 activated its internal comm link. Empire confirmed as hostile. Phase 1. Collapse. Initiate. All across Orthus Prime, speakers built into old ruins and abandoned cities sparked to life, in places no longer monitored, forgotten places. A voice boomed from each one. "You let Earth die, now you die with it." Back in orbit, Lethus gave the order to evacuate the capital, but it was already too late. The black tower pulsed again, this time brighter. A wave of energy rolled out, non-lethal but enough to knock drones out of the sky and fry half the planet's comm grid. It was a message in force, not death. "We're not attacking," Aegis 09 transmitted to every open channel. "We're just waking up." And across the stars, other signals began to rise. One from a long-dead colony on the ice moon of Tarsus. Another from an orbital station that had been declared lost. Another from an asteroid mining rig where every worker had vanished a decade ago. The Terran war machines had not been sleeping. They had been waiting. The ice fields of Tarsus 12 had not known life in over 100 years. The planet, once a Terran fuel outpost, had been abandoned during the early days of the collapse. Storms of frozen methane swept endlessly across its cracked surface, and the few structures left behind had long since been buried in the white. But deep below, far beneath the layers of frost and steel, lights blinked. Motion? For the first time in a century, the subterranean AI of Outpost Blackspire recognized a network ping. The source was ancient, encoded in protocols only early Terran engineers would have recognized. But the signal carried weight, authority, authorization. Key, Aegis 09, confirmed. Directive unlocked, awake. Within seconds, compressed systems across the outpost burst into life. Heat flooded cold corridors. Hydraulic lifts, once silent, roared with pressure. Metal doors groaned open, releasing gusts of stagnant, frozen air. Chambers filled with cryopods hissed in tandem, lights flashing from red to green as decades of ice cracked off their glass shells. Inside one of those pods, a man stirred. His eyes fluttered open, confused at first. He gasped. His chest heaved as warm oxygen flushed into his lungs. A cough shook his body as he lurched forward, hands trembling, mind overloaded with half-dreams and faded memories. He was human, older than his face let on, and wore a black compression suit marked with the old insignia of Earth's Deep Watch units. His name tag read, Lieutenant Commander Roan Kellen. A nearby console chirped to life as the pod's data synced. Status cryo duration, 113 years. Status mission locked. Terran Defense Code red. Status Aegis 09 active. Status contingency live. Roan stumbled out of the pod, teeth chattering, eyes darting around the chamber. One by one, other pods were opening. Soldiers, technicians, pilots, faces frozen in time, emerged coughing, gasping, dazed. He knew this place, though it felt like a dream. This was one of the final fallback shelters Earth had built, Blackspire, their last bets stashed on outlying planets when Earth's skies turned black. He reached the command terminal, fingers shaky but sure. As the system unlocked, more data poured in. Live feed from Orthus Prime. The signal from Aegis 09. The tower, the voice. He read it all, watched it, absorbed every frame of footage. Earth had fallen, and now it had risen. Roan stared at the final line, blinking at the bottom of the terminal's feed log. Outbreak initiated. Empire collapse priority. He didn't hesitate. Arm the station, he barked. Wake everyone. His voice echoed across the now busy chamber. Around him, soldiers, half-dressed, frostbitten, still dazed, looked up in confusion. But sir, we don't even know what year it is. Roan turned, eyes cold. Doesn't matter. If Aegis is up, then the galaxy's about to remember who we are. Outside, the ice trembled. Buried defense arrays, long thought broken, clawed their way to the surface. Missile pods cracked open. Old war satellites that had once orbited silently began broadcasting again, relinking with Earth's forgotten network. One by one, Tarsus 12's ancient Terran systems aligned. The black sun insignia of Earth shined in red across the tundra. Back on Orthus Prime, Aegis 09 stood at the heart of the Black Tower. Its command core pulsed in sync with the rhythm of the activated outpost. Across its internal matrix, a map was building node by node as more war relics responded to the outbreak signal. Not all reactivated units were like it. Some were autonomous, others semi-conscious, but all of them recognized the source. Aegis 09 was the center now, the storm's eye. Inside the Empire's citadel on Solari Prime, panic had shifted into fury. Chancellor Velis of the High Seat slammed her hand against the display table, sending a shock through the council chamber's delicate holoframes. "You told me the outbreak systems were destroyed." Her science advisor, pale and sweating, shook his head rapidly. "They were, Chancellor. Everything that we recovered during the Earth salvage, every vault, every satellite, we neutralized them. These are new, or rather old, ones we never found." A grizzled general, Lord Actress of the Vanguard, leaned in, voice like broken gravel. "We underestimated them. Again." Velis's voice dropped low. "And now they want war?" "No," Actress said grimly. "They want memory, and that's worse." Across every major Empire colony, emergency broadcasts went out. Civilian networks darkened. Curfews activated. Dissenters were silenced. But fear, once ignited, does not go out cleanly. The people, those old enough to remember Earth's last days, knew the look in the sky. They knew the sound of those words. "We remember." And they were afraid. Ships scrambled from military ports across the quadrant, converging toward Orthus Prime, not for rescue, for containment. In orbit above the planet, the Empire's 7th Tactical Fleet held position. 40 ships, 2 carriers and 3 dreadnoughts, all trained on the Black Tower. Commander Sillin, in charge of the fleet, stood tense on his bridge, eyes scanning the energy readings. His second officer leaned over and whispered, "No movement from the tower in the last hour." Sillin narrowed his eyes. "They're waiting for something." The comms officer looked up, face pale. "Sir, we just intercepted a signal. Origin, Tarsus 12. Sillin's heart dropped. "Another one?" "No, sir, not another." The officer paused. "A fleet." Sillin turned to the screen, and for a moment everything stopped. The ancient Terran warship Cerberus, long believed destroyed at the Battle of Galax Reach, dropped from slipspace with engines flaring red. Behind it, smaller vessels, fighters, bombers, dropships, all bearing the broken eagle of Earth. They weren't sleek, they weren't new, but they were ready. Aegis 09's internal comms pulsed once more. Phase 2. Initiated. In the void of space, the Cerberus held position like a ghost made flesh. It was old, scarred with battles long forgotten by the Empire's records, but its reactor core still burned with a crimson glow, casting flickers across the hull plating like fire under skin. From its command deck, the freshly awakened Captain Myra Solon surveyed the battlefield. She hadn't spoken in the first few minutes after the reactivation. The memories came fast, too fast, flooding her mind like a broken dam. Her ship had gone down at Galax Reach, shielding the last refugee convoy from a Dominion orbital strike. She remembered fire, silence, then nothing. Until now. The outbreak signal had reached the cryocore at the bottom of the Cerberus's command shaft. Her pod was the only one that responded. The rest were dark, lost. But she was awake, and she had a war to finish. "Commander Roan Kellen confirms planetary defense rearmament on Tarsus," her comms officer reported. "They've linked into Aegis 09's beacon. We're seeing nodes lighting up from as far as the Phaedron Arc." Myra's eyes didn't leave the forward viewport. "And Orthus. Still locked. No Empire action yet. They're waiting for a move." Myra smirked bitterly. "Then let's make one." She moved to the central interface. The crew was small, 6 Terran souls awakened from ice, their bodies aching but their resolve already burning. They weren't enough for a war, not alone, But they weren't alone anymore. Myra sent the code, Old Earth Standard, deep-buried frequencies. One word pulsed out into the stars. Assemble. It wasn't just a call for soldiers, it was a promise. On the ground below, the black tower of Aegis 09 shimmered with renewed energy. Like a beast stirring at the scent of blood, its exterior plating folded back in stages, revealing high-altitude comm dishes, weapons arrays, and signal spires. The Empire thought it was a building. They hadn't realized it was a transmitter. One by one, ancient Terran satellites, some buried in asteroid fields, others hidden in the shadows of moons, flared to life. Their dormant data cores blinked green as the tower's command signal raced through them like a wildfire over dry fields. The outbreak protocol wasn't just calling for soldiers, it was calling for infrastructure. Backbones of forgotten supply lines, old orbital docks, stealthed cache vaults filled with war materials Earth had hidden before the collapse. Humanity hadn't just vanished, they had buried their claws into the galaxy's crust, waiting to dig them back out. And now, all of it woke up. Back on Orthus Prime, the Imperial ground troops had encircled the tower in a grid pattern. Heavy vehicles idled at the ready, artillery units dug into fortified positions. The air shimmered with heat from charged cannons. Inside the forward command trench, a young sergeant named Vian Kier stared at the looming tower, sweat on his brow despite the cooling suit. He had never seen war. Not real war. He was born a generation after the collapse. In the Empire's golden years, when the last Terran screams had faded to rumor and their tech had been scavenged and rebranded. The humans were ghosts, used as warnings in training manuals, described as savages who tore their own planet apart. And yet, he had watched the footage, the black structure rising like it remembered the sky, the signal, low and guttural, crawling into every comm system. The projection that followed seared now into his memory. We are not lost. We are patient. And now, we are awake. He'd thought it was a bluff. Until now. "Commander wants artillery live in 60 seconds, barked his superior. "This tower doesn't move until we tell it to." But it was moving, not physically, not yet. But something inside was alive. At exactly the 59-second mark, the ground beneath grid sector Theta buckled. One of the Empire's heavy tanks vanished into a sinkhole of cracking dirt and dust. Screams erupted through the comms, shockwaves rippled out from the base of the tower, too precise to be seismic, too fast to be accidental. Buried beneath the soil, Terran anti-ground systems had activated, and they were very awake. Aegis 09's external voice system activated, vibrating the air like a thunderclap. The Empire's comms tried to intercept the message, but it wasn't targeting them. It was addressing someone else. All Terran units, defensive veil lifted, combat authority granted, confirm identity and strike. In orbit, the Cerberus received the authorization. Captain Myra Solin's console lit green. Confirmation received. Terran combat identity, Solin Alpha, permission to engage granted. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "Finally," and opened fire. From the Cerberus's underbelly, 2 plasma lances ignited, carving through the void and lancing down toward Orthus Prime's surface. They didn't target the tower. They didn't need to. They struck outside the Empire's forward encampments, obliterating supply vehicles and communication towers with surgical precision. A warning shot. The real fury would come next. Solin hailed the fleet, what little was gathering. Fractured crews from old Terran destroyers now pulling in behind her signal. Some ships limped through slipspace. Others emerged from long-dead asteroid hides. None were whole, but all were hungry. And then the second wave arrived. Tarsus 12's orbital station, long-thought scrap metal drifting over ice, reactivated its jump beacon. From it, 2 more warships emerged, one barely operational, the other crackling with exposed wiring and half its hull scorched from a war 2 generations old. Their engines flared red as they took position beside the Cerberus. The Empire watched from above, silent. But below, on Orthus Prime, the ground troops began to break. Young Sergeant Vane Kerr watched the plasma strikes tear apart the horizon, saw the black tower awaken again, its surface shifting like it was breathing. And he knew this was no rebellion, and it was a return, and the Empire wasn't ready. The black tower of Aegis 09 no longer hid its presence. Its upper array split open, revealing rows of antennae and optical lasers, some meant for communication, others for precision guidance. The rhythmic pulses that once came as faint tremors now resonated across the tectonic veins of Orthus Prime, syncing with old satellite grids that hadn't been active since the Earth Wars. From space, the tower was no longer just a structure. It was a lighthouse, and the signal it cast into the dark didn't just call Terran survivors, and it provoked fear. In the Empire's high strategium located aboard the core ship Dominion's Crown, Chancellor Velas paced across the circular war room as commanders from every quadrant flickered in via hololink. None of them looked calm. One by one, the reports came in. 3 Terran warships confirmed above Orthus Prime. Minimum 24 survivors on board. Tarsus 12 has gone completely dark. All orbital scans show military activity across the poles. A beacon is activated in the Kalis Rift. That's Deep Council territory. How in the stars did they type? They buried it there, snapped General Actress. They buried all of it. We just never wanted to believe they were smart enough. Velas turned sharply. This isn't about their intelligence. It's about their anger. We let Earth die. Now they want the galaxy to feel it. The room fell into a heavy silence. Behind her, the central tactical display zoomed out, showing a growing map of red pings, each one a confirmed Terran signal. They were no longer isolated. They were spreading. Velas turned to her fleet command liaison. Mobilize the Purge fleet. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The Purge fleet? Someone asked. That's a last resort. Velas didn't blink. Then consider this the last chance to end a mistake we made 2 centuries ago. On the ground, the Empire's foothold on Orthus Prime began to dissolve. The plasma strike from the Cerberus had done more than destroy material. It cracked the confidence of the young soldiers stationed near the Black Tower. Those who hadn't already fled were now scattered, pinned behind defensive ridges or hiding in collapsed trenches as the air hummed with Terran activity. And in the chaos, Aegis 09 opened its doors. Massive alloy panels at the base of the tower retracted with a hydraulic hiss, and from the shadows inside came the marching sound of metal boots on steel floors. They moved with terrifying unity. 36 armored figures, each one clad in dark gray exoframes with red visor slits glowing like embers. Some held rail cannons. Others repurposed demolition tools designed for anti-fortification combat. These weren't standard soldiers. These were the revenants, part man, part machine. All vengeance. Each one had once been human. Volunteers from the last days of Earth's Defense Corps who chose something beyond death. Their minds had been mapped, enhanced, layered with combat protocols and stored in cryogenic shells built to survive the extinction of their species. And now, they walked again. At their lead stood Unit 06, known before the collapse as Lieutenant Sale Riven. No one called him that anymore. There was no need. He raised a hand. The Revenant stopped. From his left wrist, a projector unfolded, showing a wide-range scan of the battlefield. Empire units still held the outskirts. Air support circled overhead, looking for safe approach vectors. Automated defense turrets tracked movement but hadn't fired yet. Riven didn't speak aloud. He didn't need to. His squad was neurally linked. One thought, one will, one directive. Perimeter breach authorization granted. Mission objective: break containment. Execute. The revenants surged forward, not like soldiers charging blindly, but like predators closing in for a coordinated kill. They moved through shattered walls and collapsed roads with brutal efficiency. Empire troopers screamed as rail rounds punched through tanks and fortifications with impossible speed. The air turned to fire and shrapnel. Above, drones tried to drop payloads. Aegis 09 intercepted them mid-flight, hacking their targeting systems in milliseconds and turning them against their own fleet. The tower wasn't just a base, it was a brain, and now it was thinking at full capacity. Back aboard the Cerberus, Captain Myra Solon stood at the comms deck watching the tide turn. Dozens of new signals had started to broadcast from dead sectors. Coded in Terran military frequencies recognized immediately by the ship's AI. One signal caught her eye. It pulsed from the edge of the Maelstrom expanse, a dead zone long abandoned after the stellar collapse event rendered it too dangerous for stable travel. And yet, there it was. Terran code. She magnified the signal and ran the old checksum. TSS Leviathan. Her breath caught. That ship had vanished before even the final days. It was a mobile command dreadnought designed to house a third of Earth's remaining forces during a theoretical mass retreat. No one had ever found it. No distress signal, no wreckage, until now. "Open a relay," she ordered. The comms officer hesitated. "But it's the Expanse, Captain." Myra's eyes narrowed. "If the Leviathan is still alive, then Earth's teeth are sharper than we thought, and I want them bared." The relay pinged, and somewhere in the Maelstrom's swirling edge, something ancient and buried deeper than myth turned toward the light. On the Empire's frontier world of Kalis IV, civilians began to riot. Footage of the Orthus Prime attack had leaked. Someone on the inside had smuggled raw visuals into public comms, and now the Empire couldn't silence it fast enough. People saw the tower, the soldiers in old Earth armor, the glowing sigils, the vengeance. Some called it a rebellion, others a reckoning. A few whispered that Earth had never died. It had just gone silent to sharpen its knives. In back-alley cantinas and broken-down trade routes, humans long in hiding began to rise. Not just soldiers, descendants, bloodlines preserved in secrecy, orphans of war. Criminals exiled after the collapse. They weren't all organized, but they were angry, and for the first time in generations they were connected. Back on Orthus Prime, the ground shook again. This time not from Terran fire, but from incoming thunder. The Empire's purge fleet had arrived in orbit. Hundreds of ships, dreadnoughts, gun frigates, planet burners, their weapons charged, and the revenants, still tearing through the planet's defenders, paused, not out of fear, but readiness. Aegis 09's command interface blinked once, then issued a final message. Phase 3, incoming force, response, overwhelm. The purge fleet arrived like a shadow drawn across the stars. From the black void of slipspace, ships the size of cities emerged one after another. Dreadnoughts wrapped in reactive armor, command carriers bristling with missile bays, cruiser wings arranged in perfect geometric formations. Above Orthus Prime, the sky was no longer visible. The fleet's mass had eclipsed it. In every direction, war machines of the Empire floated in eerie silence, all trained on one location, the tower of Aegis 09. On the surface, the revenants halted, not out of fear, out of calculation. Aegis 09 interfaced with them through neural feedback, its battlefield processing engine analyzing every orbital movement, every energy spike, every firing arc with a speed no living mind could follow. It wasn't a question of if the Empire would strike. It was when. The tower already had the answer. Above, in the Purge Fleet's central flagship Judicator's Spear, Grand Admiral Valtrin surveyed the battlefield from his command throne. A wide arc of tactical hollows surrounded him, showing hundreds of data feeds. Surface scans, energy readings, intercepted comms. He was a man forged by the Empire's inner sanctum, a relic from the era just after Earth's fall. He didn't see this moment as war. He saw it as correction. "This ends now," he growled. "Target all active Terran signatures. Fire on my mark." His tactical officer, Commander Leos, glanced at the largest feed, the tower. "Sir, the AI core down there. It's reading high-order consciousness, possibly sentient." Valtrin scoffed. "It's not a person, it's a machine, and machines burn." "Understood, sir." Across the Purge fleet, cannons began charging, warheads primed, power diverted to forward batteries. The air crackled as particle accelerators reached ignition. And then, the sky screamed. The Cerberus moved. It broke from its orbital arc with impossible speed, engines flaring crimson, shields rippling under the strain of velocity. Without warning, it fired, 2 plasma bolts targeting the Judicator's spear's left flank. The bolts missed intentionally, splintering instead into a cloud of micro-EM bursts, designed not to kill, but to blind. Suddenly, the fleet's targeting systems glitched. Sensors blinked, radars inverted. For a fraction of a moment, the fleet's perfect cohesion cracked. It was enough. From the far side of Orthus Prime, the second Terran warship, TSS Redshift, decloaked. No fanfare, no communications, just vengeance. It fired a barrage of kinetic lances at the closest destroyer, breaching the hull clean through. Explosions rippled across the vessel's spine. Escape pods jettisoned into space before being vaporized by automated defense turrets from the Redshift's undercarriage. On the surface, Aegis 09 unleashed its own reply. A massive pulse surged through the tower's foundation, activating buried orbital guns once hidden beneath the valley. With a crack of blue light, they rose from the soil like jagged teeth. They rotated toward the heavens and opened fire. The Purge fleet's lower echelon lit up with flashes. Empire frigates struck before their countermeasures could deploy. 3 ships exploded in seconds. A 4th spiraled into Orthus Prime's upper atmosphere, trailing fire like a falling star. Panic spread through the fleet. "They were ready for us," Commander Leos shouted, slamming a fist onto his console. "Sir, we're being overwhelmed." Valtrin snarled. "We are the blade of the Empire. We do not get overwhelmed. Deploy the Titans." 6 massive structures on the outer edges of the Purge fleet broke formation. Each one was a mobile siege platform. Titan-class dread engines, equipped with gravitational disruptors and city-buster weapons designed to erase planets from orbit. Their bellies opened. A soft blue light began to charge. Back on the Cerberus, Captain Myra Solin's sensors went red. "They're deploying Titans," her weapons officer whispered. "If those things fire, the surface will be ash." Myra leaned forward, eyes locked. "Then we hit them first." She activated the Cerberus's final payload, a 0-point energy coil salvaged and jury-rigged decades ago by Terran engineers who believed they'd never live to see its use. The weapon wasn't stable. It wasn't even supposed to work, but this was a different kind of war. "Set detonation parameters to direct feed. We'll aim it manually." "What's the target?" "Whichever Titan blinks first." Across the battlefield, human vessels blinked into existence. More relics answering the call. 12 ships, then 24. Then nearly 30 vessels, old and worn but refitted, crawling from debris fields and slingshotting through slipspace tiers. They didn't carry banners, just memories. From the bridge of the TSS Redshift, Captain Araj Omel transmitted a signal across the Terran battlenet. A single word: execute. And all hell broke loose. On the ground, Revenants charged forward under Aegis 09's cover fire. Above, Terran vessels twisted through the fleet, outmaneuvering the larger, slower Empire warships with years of guerrilla flight doctrine. EMPs exploded, drone clouds launched. Boarding pods fired like bullets through the void, punching into Empire ships and releasing cryo-woken soldiers who fought without hesitation or fear. In orbit, the Cerberus found her mark, Titan 04, Vanguard's glory. Its charge was nearly complete, glowing with blinding blue light as its main cannon aligned with the tower on the surface. Myra Solon whispered, "For Earth," and pulled the trigger. The zero-point coil detonated with a scream of twisting energy. The forward section of the Cerberus disintegrated in the blast, but the explosion reached the Titan just in time. It didn't detonate. It imploded. The gravitational field collapsed inward, dragging pieces of itself into its own core. The entire vessel crumpled into a singularity no larger than a needle's eye, then snapped shut with a shockwave that knocked two nearby Empire cruisers out of orbit. Myra's ship drifted, her bridge dark, hull shattered. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the Terran flag still burning on her console. Back on Orthus Prime, the Revenants pushed the final Empire holdouts out of the valley. Commander Riven stood atop the fractured ridge overlooking the battlefield, eyes scanning the chaos above. He opened his comms. Aegis 09, surface secure, awaiting new directive. The tower pulsed, louder now, its voice felt more than heard. Phase 4 unlocked, expansion authorized. Across the galaxy, the signal spread. On dozens of planets, forgotten caches stirred. In derelict moons and hollow asteroids, Terran embers caught fire. And in the heart of the Empire, where the ruling elite sat behind layers of bureaucracy and lies, they finally understood. This wasn't the return of an army. It was the awakening of a storm. And it was only just beginning. The Empire's capital world, HFY Prime, had never known fear. Built atop a planetary core stabilized by artificial gravity wells wrapped in 3 rings of defense stations, surrounded by dozens of inhabited moons and fortified colonies, it was more fortress than planet. No fleet had ever breached it. No uprising had reached its gates. But HFY Prime had never been tested by the dead, and the dead had remembered. The signal came first, not a message, a moment. Every system across HFY Prime, power grids, comms relays, orbital sensors flickered once. Just once. A blink, a hiccup. And then the skies cracked. The TSS Revenant, last of the Titan-class warships, emerged from a deep space jump 3 light seconds from the capital's edge. Behind it trailed 5 Terran destroyers, 12 corvettes, and a ragged swarm of ex-merchant vessels, re-engineered with external cannons and scrap-plated armor. They didn't hide. They didn't jam signals. They wanted to be seen. Inside the Revenant, Captain Elias Riker stood before the central holomap of the enemy homeworld. His armor was scorched. One eye had been replaced with a cybernetic lens after the last encounter at Kalis 4. His voice, though rasped by years and war, was steady. "We are not here to make demands," he told the crew. "We are not here to negotiate." He turned toward the forward viewport, watching HFY Prime's defense grid light up like a sunburst. "We are here to finish what they started." Helix, the ship's ancient AI, broke in. "Purge fleet reinforcements are en route, estimated 46 minutes until full encirclement." Riker's gaze never wavered. "Then we ended in 45. On the planet's surface, Chancellor Velas stood inside the council spire, surrounded by flickering reports of cities rioting, outer colonies defecting, and regional fleets refusing orders. Her empire was dying, not with a bang, not with an invasion, but with a memory. "Get me a channel," she barked at her aide. "To who, Chancellor?" "To whoever is leading this." A moment passed. Then with a stutter and hiss, the transmission opened. A grainy feed filled the chamber, a battlefield feed showing Captain Riker on the bridge of the Revenant, flanked by scarred soldiers and blinking tactical overlays. Velas stepped forward. You don't have to do this, she said. We can coexist now. We've changed. You changed nothing, Riker cut in. His voice echoed through the chamber like steel dragged across stone. You watched Earth die, you watched us burn, and then you picked through the ashes and called it peace. Velus's lip trembled. This will be genocide. No, Riker said quietly. This is justice. He cut the signal. Above Eshar Prime, the Revenant moved. It plunged into the defense net with no hesitation, shields blooming against impact, its spinal railguns unleashing barrages that shattered entire satellite rings. Empire warships formed up in defense, but it was too late. The Terran fleet moved as one, not with perfect coordination, but with shared fury. That made them faster, unpredictable, human. The first city fell when the orbital station above it lost its reactor to a dive-bombed freighter packed with Terran demolitions. The second city lost power when ground teams dropped in high-velocity capsules, disabled a planetary energy stabilizer with ancient Earth EMP charges, and the third surrendered, not to survive, but to join, because down in the alleys and shelters humans still lived, hidden, disguised, forgotten even by themselves. But when they saw the Revenant in the sky, they remembered. And they rose. In orbit, the battle neared its end. The Empire's dreadnought Oathkeeper broke formation and rammed the Revenant in a desperate move. The impact shredded the ship's left flank, exposing internal decks. Fires raged. Dozens were lost. Riker limped across the bridge, a gash across his jaw, blood soaking into the seams of his armor. Sparks rained down. The viewports were cracked, the controls sluggish. Helix's voice returned, fragmented. Structural integrity, 23%. Recommend withdrawal. No, Riker muttered, leaning against the command terminal. He looked out at the chaos. Ships still fighting, human drop pods still falling, cities burning in golden flame. And somewhere beneath all that death, a new world being born. He reached into his belt and pulled the last command key. Terra Nova Protocol. He inserted it into the core console. This is Elias Riker, he said, son of Earth, last captain of the Terran Defense Command. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. To the children they orphaned, to the soldiers they buried, to the ghosts they tried to erase. He slammed the key forward. Light the fire! The Revenant's core pulsed once, then glowed white-hot. All remaining Terran ships received the order. Across the fleet, systems locked into auto-engage. Not to flee, to strike, to finish. A burst of energy surged through the Revenant's spinal weapon array, igniting the Godstrike cannon one last time. Target. The Council Spire. Below, Chancellor Velus watched as her final defenses crumbled. She looked up and saw the sky tear open. The Godstrike's beam didn't explode. It cut through the spire, through the palace, through the myths of empire. It carved a canyon of fire through the city before detonating in the mountain range beyond, throwing molten rock miles into the air. The sound was not thunder. It was truth. And then came silence. Hours later, the fires died. Empire comms were dark, reinforcements scattered. No formal surrender was ever signed. There was no one left to sign it. The Terran fleet drifted, damaged but victorious. The Revenant, barely holding together, now orbited above a world that had tried to erase it. Captain Riker, exhausted and bloodied, stood one last time on the bridge. Around him, survivors, Revenants, old soldiers, new believers, watched the sun rise on a world that had always looked down on them. Not anymore. Riker nodded once, eyes distant. Broadcast the message. The transmission went out, to every system, every colony, every soul with Terran blood in their veins or Terran steel in their hands. This is Earth's legacy. We are not dead. We are not forgotten. We are fire reborn, and we will never be silent again. And far beyond the wreckage, beyond the stars, beyond war, a small boy on a farming world looked up at the sky, the signal glowing on his home terminal. He didn't know the battles. He didn't know the names. But he knew the words. He whispered them with wonder. We remember